just want to let you know, we're going to do a bit of housekeeping right now. And of course, the slide doesn't move just on time. I'm going to make sure everyone's on mute, and I will be monitoring the chat while Lindsay is presenting. So please feel free to post any of your questions in the chat during the presentation, and we'll get to them during Q&A time. I will be recording the session for future viewing, so that recording has started now. And without any further ado, I will hand it back to my colleague.
Thanks so much, Michelle. So as I said, everybody, we are incredibly pleased to have you all with us today so that we are able to showcase to you a product that we've had in development here in the Pacific region for Australia and New Zealand for the past few months. I'm going to jump into a demo in just a moment, but first of all, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background as to why we're looking to develop this product. So Lexis Create is what we're referring to as a workflow support tool. We've really aimed for this product to be more than just a drafting tool so that it bookends your drafting process both before you get to that point of your standard proofreading and also what you might actually choose to do with a legal document once you've actually finished compiling it. So you'll see that our Lexis Create tool is built around a three-stage workflow tool. So with that said, I'm going to dive into our product and give you an advanced preview of what we have to come in our region. So as you can see here, I have open on screen in front of me a fairly basic legal document. This is a share sale agreement. We're in Microsoft Word, which is where most of our users will be conducting their drafting throughout their day. And you can see here on our top toolbar, we have an icon here for Lexis Create. Now, all I've done here is I've selected that icon and it's launched our Lexis Create product in our right-hand side panel here as a miniature toolbar. That's also very easy to collapse. You can just select the X and that will give you back the entire screen real estate if you need that and you don't want to be bothered by Lexis Create. This three-step process that we've designed this tool to have is build, check, and complete. I'm going to run through that process in each stage and give you an example of some of the tools and features at each stage in that drafting process and how that might work with your existing drafting processes. So the first step we have here in build is really looking at what we're doing when we're actually assembling a document. Now, I know from when I was in practice that whether I needed to draft a document, there were several different places that one might start. So firstly, and most usually for me when I was in practice, we would often look for an example, a previous precedent that we had used from the firm's database. So we were very fortunate that we had a knowledge manager who managed a firm-wide precedent database for us, which was fantastic. That had a lot of documents in it, but it didn't have everything that you might need in there. I can see somebody has raised their hand at this stage. I was going to save questions until the end of today's presentation. So if you would please be able to pop your question into the chat for me, Michelle will be able to gather up those questions and then we can talk through them during the presentation. Thank you. So at this stage, we may be utilising an existing precedent from our firm-wide database, or we might be selecting a document that we have previously drafted. I know certainly if there wasn't a precedent in our firm's database, that would be my second port of call. And then thirdly, if there wasn't one in a firm database or our own personal files, then we would often turn to our resources, for example, Lexis Advance, and look for a precedent which we could utilise then. So drafting completely from scratch was quite rare, although obviously in some occasions that is necessary. So during this document assembly phase, what I have on screen here is a document that I have previously drafted, and I've taken this old document and started to overwrite it. That's what the purple text is. These are the information that I am now entering myself. Now at this phase in our content tab, we have the ability to start to compile our own personal clause database, or to access our firm's database. Now, when I say a clause database, I mean something that is created, stored, and maintained within the Lexis Create product. That content is backed up to the cloud, so to Amazon Web Services, so that it can be accessible wherever you are. I'm first going to talk you through the user case if you wanted to add some content into that database. So I'm going to just scroll through our documents and find a clause that looks like it might be of interest to us. So you can see here we have a restraint obligation. If I look at this clause and feel like this is some particularly good drafting that I might want to reutilize in the future, I can then select to add this snippet to my database. And just highlight the content I need, select add snippet, and it will then prompt me to enter some information about the document to help me locate it in the future if I need to. So I'm going to give it a title. You can see the actual snippet of content is here. And then there are some other tools which will enable us to retrieve this content at a date in the future. So for example, we might choose to tag the content. We might choose to add some notes. So for example, when we might use that content. And down here, you can see there are some functions around an approval request and also to select where you want to save that content to. Now, an important point to note about Lexis Create at this stage is that the product requires each firm to have an admin user. That firm admin, who could be a knowledge manager, or for smaller firms that don't have access to that facility, it might be a senior partner or a head of the team. That enables that person to have a degree of control over the firm's content database. So for example, they may put in place an approval workflow that requires approval to be given by that individual or another individual before content can be added to a firm-wide or departmental-wide database. That user is also able to personalize the tags. So for example, if in your firm there are some specific departments, you might call your teams different things to our practice areas. You may not have some of those departments. You can customize the tags in the back end yourself if you are the admin user. So what we're going to do here is we're going to simply select to add this snippet of content to our own database. So this is something that only myself as a user will have access to. It won't be viewable to everybody else within the firm. Once the content is saved, you will see all content that you have access to appear in the right-hand panel under content. And I'm then going to show you how we can retrieve that content at a later date. With this being the most recent content we've added, it's at the top of our list. But if I scroll down here, you can see there's a lot of other content that has been added previously into our database. Obviously, particularly if you're accessing a firm-wide database, that could be a very long list. So we have here a search feature which enables you to search across that content and then retrieve only the information that contains those search terms. You can also limit your search to all content, your own snippets, or shared content. So for example, your firm-wide database. To turn now to a user case of wishing to reuse content that's been previously added. Now, this is a great user case for firms to embed the use of firm-approved content within a workflow. If you don't have an existing precedent management system, then this is quite a good way to put in place a way for users to only be able to access content that's been approved, for example, by the knowledge manager or indeed a senior partner in a department. This enables you to search across the content that's been approved within your firm's database or your own database. And then when you find content that looks like you wish to reuse it, you can simply insert it here by selecting the insert button. It then retains the kind of format of the text above and inserts that clause at wherever you've inserted the cursor within your document. You're also able at this stage to share content. So if you wish, you can select the share button. That will enable you to copy the information. So if you wanted to put the clause into an email or another document or somewhere else, you can do so, or you can select to email it straight from within Lexis Create. At this stage, I'd also like to talk to you about a future development of Create. What we are intending to do in the new year is to also add the functionality so that a user can search across practical guidance content that is included within their subscription from within Lexis Create. So that option will be available underneath this tab, and you'll be able to use the search bar in the same way that we've just seen. What that will do is limit the search to practical guidance content that is within your existing subscription. So for example, if you only have access to the employment module, you will only see results from precedent content and drafting notes from within the employment module. And the functionality will work in exactly the same way as content you've added yourself. You'll be able to insert that content with just one click. So in our document drafting user case here, I want to then move on to the second stage of that process. At this point, we're going to assume that our customer has been able to prepare the first draft of their document, and they now want to move on to check this document. This essentially represents the important proofreading step in any workflow process, which we know is of vital importance before you send that document anywhere. Legal drafting goes much further than just checking that your spelling and grammar is correct, and involves ensuring that every element of your document is accurate. In the CDI, or the customer discovery work that we've done both here in the Pacific and that our colleagues completed in the UK, this proofreading function was certainly identified as one of the most important to our users. You can see here that as soon as you select the check, it runs a search across the document that was happening in the background as I was just talking and then pulls up a list on the right-hand side of any issues that the tool has identified with your documents. Those issues are then further broken down into 3 phases: analyze, review, and refine. As you can see, there are several subheadings under this step, and I don't intend today to run through each of these sections in detail, or we'll be here all day. So I'm going to select some of the areas that customers have been most interested in when we've shown them this product in discovery. One of the particularly important ones for me is the incomplete information facility. As I mentioned previously, one of the more common drafting user cases is to identify a precedent from a firm's database or to overwrite a document that you may have used previously. Incomplete information will comb through your document and identify any text, for example, contained within square brackets, as in this document, where the tool believes that you need to insert information. So, for example, here we can see that it's asking us to insert a relevant state or territory under business days. The document is giving us information about what we need to do to get that document ready. This has been picked up by Lexis Create, and we can then furthermore select here to enter our replacement text. It will jump to that area of the document, highlight it, and we can actually enter the replacement text here without returning to our document and select replace. Another item I'd like to pick out at this stage is citations. Now, at this point, I should mention our proposed launch date for Lexis Create. The version I'm showing you today is a test version of the product. We are currently in the testing phase and we are almost complete. It is our aim to launch this product later this year before Christmas, and then to do a full commercial release in the new year. The one remaining element of the product, which is currently under development, is our citations feature. I'll show you how it works currently and explain to you what the usability will be within the next few weeks. So currently, our citations tool will pick up on case citations contained within our document. That's useful, but we want this to go further and do much more to help our users than just that. So the functionality that will be available in the product for launch is that not only will Lexis Create identify your case citations, but it will also return to you here information from the Lexis Advance platform, as well as linking out to the case-based entry on our Lexis Advance platform too. Here, you will be able to see the name of the case, the status of the case, so it will include our case treatment flags from the advanced platform, and there will also be a link which will take you directly through to the case-based entry on our platform, from where you can navigate easily to the full text cases if that's what you desire to access. As I say, this is the remaining feature in development at present and will be within the product before launch. Some of the other information you can see in our right-hand tab here are, for example, cross-references. We know this is definitely an issue for many users. If you are doing many drafts of a document and amending it, cross-references is the one area that can be thrown out quite a lot. Every amendment you make by including another clause can throw out every cross-reference within the document. So we've included functionality here so that you can spot those issues. I also want to talk about one of the areas of product where we have needed to do the most development. Identifiable information is a function that combs through your document to look for important information. We've programmed the algorithm to identify information, for example, addresses, telephone numbers, locations, names, and in the future, we'll also be including IRD numbers, passport numbers, and other important information. The point of this is to identify information which often may be input inaccurately or that could be inconsistent without a document. For example, a company name or a person's name may be referenced differently within the document. This feature spots all occurrences of that information and then enables you to check A, that it's accurate, and B, to replace that text if you need to with correct information. You'll also see why that information is important in a moment when I talked about our redact feature. The ability to identify any information in a document that could identify an individual, such as their name, their passport numbers, their addresses, is very important when we look to securely redact a document and send it across to the other side. Other information which can be clearly identified at this stage includes dates and times. Again, not only can this information be referenced inconsistently throughout a document, but if an important date changes, you want to be sure that you can comb through a document to find every instance of that date and ensure that they all align. Furthermore, in our refined feature, you can see tools here around numbering, general formatting, for example, the use of brackets and punctuation, and also an option here for inclusive language. The demonstration document I'm using today is obviously doing okay for inclusive language, but this option generally will refer you to any uses of the terms his and her throughout a document and suggest what you may wish to replace that with. In view of time, I'm going to move now onto the final stage of our drafting process. This is the complete phase. This phase enables us to do several things with our document in order to get it ready for whatever we might do with it next. That could involve sending the document to the other side or even filing that document with the court. One of the features here, which our users have been most excited about, is the redact feature. Redact is programmed to use the identifiable information rules from the check feature to identify that information and then enable us to permanently redact the information. When you select that option, it will pop up and ask you to save a secondary version of the document. That is because the redaction feature is permanent, so you don't want to overwrite your original draft. You can then securely send the redacted version of the document across to the other side, safe in the knowledge that they will be unable to do the redaction phase and that information will not be disclosed. We also have here a few other steps. One of the ones I want to call out is finalize document. This is the stage in our document where it will prompt us to remove the metadata and bookmarks that Lexis Create inserts within your document. Although these are not visible to the naked eye, in order for Create to work accurately, when it combs through your document at the review phase, it adds hidden bookmarks within there so that it knows where exactly certain information is within the document. That helps the tool to work very quickly when you're selecting options as you move through the workflow process. By removing the bookmarks, they can be securely and permanently removed. And when you send this document across to the other side, there'll be no way of them knowing that you've benefited from having Lexis Create run across your document. The final step to mention here is an integration into DocuSign. As you can see here, when you select this, it simply launches the DocuSign account. Users must have an existing account with DocuSign in order to enable access to this feature. Currently, we are only offering an integration with DocuSign as it seems to be one of the most popular execution tools here in New Zealand, but in the future, we may look to expand that to other services dependent on our customer feedback. I'd also like to say a word here just about the future roadmap for Lexis Create. So the version of Create that I've shown you today is a tool which will work on all PCs currently, subject to some minimum technical requirements, which we don't think are too stringent. However, we're also working on what we call an Office.js version of Lexis Create. This version of the tool will make Create accessible both within Microsoft Outlook, but also on Apple Macs for any customers who may be using those. That version will be available later in the new year. The second development piece, which I alluded to earlier, is our integration into practical guidance. This will be a feature which is usable for any existing practical guidance subscribers. You will only be able to search across that content should you have an existing subscription, and the search functionality will be limited to content which is included within your existing practical guidance subscription. That again is slated for launch early in the new year. Finally, we are also working on building out an integration into another new product. So whilst Lexis Create focuses on giving you flexibility to draft any kind of legal document you may wish to, we are currently also developing our first artificial intelligence enabled tool, Clause Intelligence. This will launch mid-year next year and is a function which enables users to look at their contract that they are drafting, and the AI will suggest to users alternate clauses from the LexisNexis database that they might want to utilize instead of the drafting present in their existing document. We will build an integration into the Lexis Create tool, which will be visible here, just under the Content tab. Clause Intelligence will be a bolt-on subscription that you are able to add to your Create subscription and access the functionality in that way. The pilot area for our Clause Intelligence tool is business law, and shortly after that, we will be adding employment law content into the AI so that you are able to benefit from our suggestions for how you might want to improve and refine your drafting. That's all I'd like to say today in terms of a basic demo of the product. I could go into some of the features in more detail, but I'm aware that we're already 25 minutes through today's demonstration, and I would like to hand over to Michelle to see if there are any key questions in the chat from today's session that I can answer for you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, the chat section was a little quiet, but we did get a few questions in before the event. If anybody would like to submit a question in chat, you still have time. But in the meantime, what's this going to cost, Lindsay? I'm sure everybody has that on their mind.
Absolutely. So to answer that simply, we obviously will be pricing Lexis Create in accordance with the sort of standard kind of pricing curve that we have for most of our products, which is usually on a per user license basis. The starting point for that per user license is, I believe, around $1,100. And in addition, we will also be rolling out a new pricing structure. That will be an enterprise-wide pricing structure, which enables a firm to pay a reduced price if they choose to roll Lexis Create out to the entire firm. As I mentioned previously, the firm has the option of setting up a firm-wide database as well as departmental-wide databases to ensure consistency of drafting across the firm. And by choosing to embed Create across all users within a firm, they can really benefit from that feature, particularly if they don't have access to an existing precedent database. So we've chosen to help those firms by rolling out a reduced price for those users.
Great, thank you. And apologies, the dreaded leaf blowers have started on my street. Nelson popped a question in the chat. What if the other party does not have the same program?
That doesn't matter at all. So Lexis Create is really used to build and refine your existing document. So when you send it to the other side, regardless of whether they have Lexis Create or not, they won't be able to see anything to do with Lexis Create. We absolutely suggest that you remove those bookmarks as the final step before sending it across, and then nobody needs to know that you've even utilized a tool in your drafting workflow. So yeah, there's no dependency for other firms to have that tool at all.
Great. Next from the chat, where will Clause Intelligence retrieve suggested phrases from?
Excellent question. So Clause Intelligence uses an artificial intelligence tool that our development team has based to comb through LexisNexis content. So currently it is programmed to look across drafting content from within practical guidance. So it will, for example, look at precedents. Part of our development phase has enabled us to make sure that those precedents are actually marked up, a content markup at clause level, which enables us to retrieve that content at a clause level. And they will then be returned to users via create. Not only does it look at actual precedent content and actual clauses, but it will also look for any drafting notes within our content, which also includes those terms.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. And then a follow-up question, will Te Reo Māori be supported?
That also is a great question. And actually there is a feature that I didn't show you within Lexis Create. Perhaps we can do a video on this or something to showcase it, because it's quite an exciting feature. We've actually programmed Lexis Create with, I think, around 300 Te Reo Māori legal terms. So for example, the names of courts and particular legal phrases that might be used. And we've actually programmed Lexis Create to identify the usage of that language within the tool, with the idea there really being for you to just check that you've used it accurately and that you've drafted it correctly. So it's actually the algorithm behind the scenes has been programmed to actually identify the use of certain Māori terms. As I say, for our initial launch, there's around 300 which are programmed, but that's certainly a list that we would look to expand over time. And we would absolutely ask our users that if there's anything you find missing from that list, we can very easily add it into the tool so that it can also identify that going forward.
Fantastic. Another question from before the event. Do I need to have an existing subscription to LexisNexis products in order to use Create?
So the short answer to that question is no, you absolutely don't need to. If you don't have an access to either Lexis Advanced or Practical Guidance, you'll still be able to utilize most of the tools from within Lexis Create. So for example, the proofreading function will still work with no changes, with the exception of the citations checking feature. So in order to maximize the citations checking feature, you do need to have an existing subscription to Lexis Advanced, and more specifically to Casebase, because the citations checking feature will be programmed to link to the Casebase entry. So I would certainly suggest that in terms of minimum requirements, you might want to have a Casebase subscription. Obviously, if you want to utilize the integration with practical guidance content, then you do need to have the practical guidance modules that you want to look at included within your subscription, and that will all work automatically. So behind the scenes, we will do an integration with Lexis Advanced and Practical Guidance. When we set you up as a user, it will recognize what your existing status is, so whether you have access to those products, and then those features will automatically work for you. If you're not an existing subscriber to either of those products, then the features simply won't work, but all other functionality will.
Wonderful. Well, that's it for the pre-questions. No other questions in chat at the moment. So just like that, we are at time. We'd like to thank you all for joining us today and hope you found this session helpful for your legal workflow. If you're interested in finding out more information about Lexis Create, just use your camera to scan the QR code on the screen right now, or you can contact your relationship manager, or you can contact me at michelle.fairbank@lexisnexis.co.nz. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Take te ano.
Thanks all. Bye.